Hey y'all, welcome to Cooking with Miss Holt. We are going to make biscuits today, and I will tell you, biscuits is probably in the top 5 things that Southern cooks get asked about. How do you make them? People are afraid to make them. They don't know how. They get frustrated. And I will just say flat out that practice makes perfect. It's not something that most people are going to get right the first time. I didn't. I don't think anybody else did. And I think the more you do it, the better at it you become, like anything else, you know. So, there's just kind of some overall rules. I will say the more you handle biscuit dough, the tougher it's going to get. So you want to handle it as little as possible, but you still have to mix it up and you still have to knead it and roll it out and, so on and so forth. So, but you just don't want to, I'm not the person who pinches off the dough and just kind of rolls it and does this and that. I think it makes it tough. There's 100 different ways to make biscuits, and I would say probably most of them are correct. I've made biscuits with Crisco and I've made biscuits with butter, which we're going to do today. I've done it both ways, and I think butter is just far better. It gives it a better taste. And I've also done it with unsalted and salted butter, and salted is better by far, I think. I will tell you my preferred flour, and then we're going to get started. I think the best flour to use is White Lily unbleached self-rising flour. And if you can't find that, then just White Lily self-rising. But I do think that the White Lily unbleached self-rising has the best taste. Okay, well, we're going to get started. Let me show you what I have in my bowl. And before I do that, let me just kind of hold this up. Now, you don't have to have this, but I use this. This is a pastry cutter. Okay, it's got a little bit of cream cheese on it there because I put cream cheese in my biscuits, and I'll tell you about that just in a second. But anyway, you can cut this butter and cream cheese in with a fork. You can do it with your fingers. I bought that pastry cutter, I think at Kohl's. It's heavy, and now I bought it several years ago. I don't even know if they even carry it anymore, but it's heavy. And basically you use it like you would use a potato masher. You just dip it in your flour, and then it's called cutting in. You just cut in your butter and your Crisco into the flour, and you want to get where you don't see any big chunks anymore. So anyway, all right, so we'll get started here. Okay, what I have in here is I have 2 cups of White Lily unbleached self-rising flour, and I have 4 tablespoons of salted butter and 2 ounces, which is about 1/4 of the package, just kind of slice off. You can guesstimate it, of an 8-ounce box of cream cheese. So you just want to take 1/4 of an 8-ounce block of cream cheese, which is 2 ounces. And you just want to cut it in until you don't see really huge chunks anymore. I mean, if it's the size of, English peas or something like that, that's okay. But you don't want any, you don't want big chunks of butter, and things like that. Okay, so to save time, I've already cut that in. Now, you need buttermilk, really, to make biscuits. Buttermilk's going to make it better by far. They make it rise better and just give it a better taste. Now, this calls for, like I said, 2 cups of self-rising flour, 4 tablespoons of salted butter is what I have in here, and 2 ounces of cream cheese. Now, I just poured up my buttermilk, and I forgot to shake it up when I went to pour it out. And when I poured it, it was just water, or the whey off the top. So make sure you shake up your buttermilk. Now, my store, all they had was low-fat buttermilk. If that's all you can get, if all they have is low-fat and no fat, then for sure get the low-fat. But if they've got full-fat, get that, because you're much better off, because the biscuits need the fat. But this is what my store had. So anyway, the recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. Now, I know it's probably going to take all of this, but I'm going to leave a little bit in reserve right there. But you just want to stir it up. And I always used to tell my students, and for people that are just joining us, I'm a retired home ec teacher, and my kids made biscuits every single semester, and they loved it. I always told my kids, you know, to start, don't pour all of it in there. You can always add to, but you can't take out. So, and you want it the consistency of Play-Doh. That's about the best way I can describe it because, you know, it's pliable, but it's not soaking wet and it's not dry. Now see, I've put the whole 3/4 of a cup in there. I can tell that this is gonna take more. So really I should say it takes 3/4 to a cup. And I just add, you know, a couple of tablespoons at a time. It depends on the weather. It depends on the brand of flour that you get. But, you know, I always say start with about a 1/2 cup and add more a little at a time. I can see that's still going to take a little bit more. So really, it's going to take closer to the cup. So somewhere between 3/4 of a cup and a cup. Anyway, you just want to get all this stirred up. You don't want to see any dry flour in the bottom. That took about a cup of buttermilk. Now, what I have here is, I just have a piece of aluminum foil with flour, and I've just scattered flour all around, and we're going to turn our dough out onto that. Now, you can certainly, if you've got super clean counters, you can do it on that. I just like to do it on this, then I can fold everything up. I think it's easier to clean up, so much easier to clean up. And I will tell you before we go any further, I've got a cookie sheet with parchment paper on it. My oven has been preheated to 450 for at least 15 minutes because it needs to be super hot. Don't turn it on like 5 minutes before you want to put them in there. It really needs to be on for a good 15 minutes. Okay, so let's get our dough out here. And this is just messy, y'all. There's kind of no way around it. I took my rings off. Don't wear your rings when you do this because the dough will get all in the setting of your rings and you'll have to go have them cleaned. So you really don't want to do that. Okay, so what I do is I take just a little bit of flour in my cup, and you want to add as little as possible because it'll dry them out and make them tough. So I just pat them out like that. I kind of flip it over a couple of times just to get it coated in flour. Now, this is how I taught my students to do it. And you can do this or not do this. I'm just telling you the way I taught my kids. So we did it in a circle. I said, pat your dough out into a circle and kind of flatten it out. And so I always told them to knead their dough at least 4 times. And so this is how I taught them, and it seemed to have worked for a lot of years. They seemed to understand. So I said, pretend that it's a clock. So if you're facing the circle, it's a clock. Take the dough at 12 o'clock, which is the top of the circle. I said, take 12 o'clock and fold it down to 6 o'clock and just lightly pat it out. And then you want to take 9 o'clock and flip it to 3 o'clock and pat it out. And you kind of want to pat yourself back out into a general circle, and it doesn't have to be perfect, you know. And so you just want to do that again. So you take 12 o'clock and you fold it to 6 o'clock, pat it out, take 9 o'clock and fold it to 3 o'clock. So really 3 or 4 times, you know, if you do it 3 times, what you're doing is kneading puts air into it. And, you know, some people like flat biscuits and some people like thin biscuits. You know, I used to have an aunt that said that biscuits should not have a middle. It should be a top crust and a bottom crust. And I always kind of, you know, laughed and said, well, that kind of sounds like a cracker to me. So, but I want biscuits to be high. And, you know, I want to see the cracks, the creases and the layers. I want to see the layers in a biscuit. So, and here's another thing. You can roll this out right here. This does not make a huge amount of dough. So, but you can roll this out or you can pat it out. I'm just going to pat it out. And y'all, this is just common sense. The thinner you pat this out, the thinner your biscuits are gonna be. And the thicker you leave the dough, the higher your biscuits are gonna be. It's just common sense. So I'm leaving this about a ½ inch thick. I know that you probably can't see that very well the way my kitchen is arranged here, but I'm leaving the dough about a ½ inch thick. And so I have an old antique biscuit cutter right here, and I'm gonna use that and cut out. And you know, and here's another thing that's just common sense. The thicker you cut your biscuits, the fewer biscuits you're gonna get. So this really just makes enough biscuits for 2 or 3 people if you have them as thick as I like to cut them out. So it's not gonna make a tremendous amount of biscuits. If you use that's probably a 3-inch biscuit cutter, I would say, close to it. Now, if you make little mini party biscuits, you know, it's going to make a lot. But, you know, a lot of this is just common sense. So anyway, and I know you've heard this before, but I'll say it again. You want to push straight down, and you want to get close up to the edge, okay? So you're not wasting dough. But you want to push straight down on that dough, and I just kind of tap it and get the flour that's on the bottom off. And then biscuit cutters usually have holes in the top, and that's so that the air will release the biscuit. And so it should look like that. And then you just put it on your cookie sheet. And what I was going to say is don't twist it. When you push down, and then lift it right back up. Don't twist it because they won't rise very well. Now, if you like biscuits with a crispy side, put your biscuits in a cake pan, a round cake pan, so that they're all touching. You can put them in an iron skillet where they're all touching. But if you want them crispy on the sides like I do, then you just put them on a cookie sheet and don't let them touch. So I'm just going to go through here and just cut all these out. And I will say this. You get the prettiest biscuits out of the first roll. Now, we can re-roll these scraps and you can get biscuits that are edible. But I always say, if you got company coming for supper, you want to make sure that you're making enough biscuits so that your company, there's enough biscuits out of the first roll for your company, because those are going to be the prettiest. And they're also going to be the softest. So let me just get these cut out, and then we'll go on. Now, I'm going to put these in the oven at 450, and they'll take somewhere between, I would say, 10 to 13 minutes, depending on how hot your oven is. And, you know, if it's just me and my family, you see how I've got this kind of strange shape right here? I would rather just cut that and let it be a biscuit rather than re-roll the scraps, because if I just do like this, you know, do I have sort of a strange shaped biscuit? Yes, but it's not going to be nearly as tough as if I re-roll that. So I'd rather have just kind of an odd shape of a biscuit that hasn't been re-rolled, because it won't be tough that way. Now, I will tell you this, what I've done at my house and what I do for my kids at school, what I've done is you can cut these little scraps up, let's say in little pieces, maybe like that. You can dip them in butter and cinnamon sugar and just toss them around in a little cereal bowl or something, but you can just pull it with your hands if you want to. Just kind of pull off pieces like that. Dip it in melted butter and cinnamon sugar. Oh my gosh, y'all. It is so good. And if you really want to get fancy, you can mix up a little powdered sugar and water and pour a glaze over them when they're done too. And they kind of taste like those cinnamon pretzels, you know, at the mall. It's got that kind of taste. Of course, they're not going to be the texture of pretzels, but they're good. I will tell you that if you eat them while they're hot. All right, I'm going to wash my hands and I'm going to put these biscuits in the oven, and then I'll come back in a minute and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. Okay, y'all, our biscuits are out of the oven. Now, you can make them as light or as dark as you would like them to be. I like them a little bit on the darker side, and I will say you probably need to turn the pan around halfway through. The back of your oven is always hotter than the front of your oven, so whatever biscuits are toward the back will get darker. So if you want them to be more even, turn it around. Now, you can see what the cracks I was telling you about, if you need them. I love those layers. I want to see where that air has been folded in there. And that's what those cracks are, is the layers of air you put in there when you needed them. And there's our strange shaped one that came out of the end of the roll there. But even that has the cracks. See, when you re-roll them, they won't. And they don't rise very well when you re-roll them. So you can kind of see that one right there. Now let me talk about the parchment paper. Parchment paper at temperatures above 400, or 400 and above, it'll get brown around the edges. But I have made, I don't know how many, hundreds of batches of biscuits with parchment paper, and I've never had parchment paper to catch fire. Now, this is parchment paper, not wax paper, so make sure you use parchment. Okay, all right, well, there you go, y'all. I will put the recipe in the comments, but you can kind of see what they look like there. And of course, you want to butter these while they're hot, and that's another reason I like these layers, is because really, and these, I just took these out like 5 seconds ago, so they're really hot, but you really don't even need a knife. You can just take your hands and just pull it, and it'll pull apart completely even. Oh, and P.S. I'm gonna toss some in butter and sugar and a cinnamon sugar, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Okay, y'all, I took my scraps and I just tossed them in a little bit of butter and cinnamon sugar, and I baked them. It really takes about the same amount of time to bake as it does the regular biscuits. And then I just mixed up some powdered sugar and water and poured it over it and made it a little glaze. So it's just little bite-sized pieces, you know, and that's not something, you know, you want to do all the time, but for a Saturday morning treat, I think your kids would love it. So see you soon.